In this video, I will be introducing project number 2, your photo manipulation project. As you can see here in Canvas, under assignments, you have all of the criteria for this project. The description indicating that you need to demonstrate a knowledge of different Photoshop tasks to manipulate a single image and present 3 outputs. Now, those 3 outputs, again, are 3 really distinct, different, unique versions from the original image. And you'll see what I mean in a moment when I run through some examples. At this point, I usually say that your starting image may be Johnny Depp in real life. Those 3 outputs are Johnny Depp in any of his movies where he looks completely different. The objectives of this project are, again, a unique and diverse development of images, but also it's to use those skills that you learned from project number 1 to render neatness, clean cuts, appropriate application of tape, good adhesions. Again, everything you learned from project number 1 using a multitude of images from magazines and various paper forms into a project that's much simpler and cleaner, and you're going to find this is generally much easier to execute. In addition, you'll also include a clear documentation of the steps that were used to render your final images, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then you'll see here following guidelines for presentation. The following guidelines, this is really your first instance where you've got to meet a multitude of measurements and outputs and borders and things like that to render a board that looks exactly the same as everyone else's. And that meaning that you have a finished board size of 24 inches by 10 inches, and that can be in either orientation. Students usually run their images horizontally, but you can run them vertically if you want to. You'll have image output sizes of 6 by 6, okay, 6 inches by 6 inches. Borders 2-inch, output spacing 1 inch, and of course 1/4 inch taped edges. So what does that all mean? What does that look like? Now I have final images for you to look at, but I also have included a spec sheet. And this spec sheet is just a visual representation of everything that's written here. So if you're more of a reader, this information may suffice. If you're more of a visual person, then this may be what is really helpful to you. And again, it's the same information. Your output images are 6 inches by 6 inches. You've got this 1-inch gutter or space between the pictures. And then there's a 2-inch border all the way around. Okay. In addition, you need to pop at least one of your images, but you can pop up to 3. So you'll see here this student popped all 3 of her images. These all 3 are popped, and then this student popped 1 and 2, but maybe not the middle. I can't remember if she popped the middle one, and it's hard to tell from the picture. And I do this because I'm trying to set you up for success. So in all honesty, 3 pop-ups look the best. But if you were one of the students in class who'd said, gosh, this was really hard, I struggled to cut through the foam core, then just focus on getting 1 really great pop-up, okay? 1 will suffice, but 3 does look better. You'll tape the original image to the back, as you can see here, and then you're going to attach documentation of the steps to the back of the board, which you can see a little bit, okay? In terms of the documentation of those steps, I like to tell you that bullets are really your friend and my friend. It makes grading your boards much simpler and easier. It also makes it easier for you because, why would you type out, full sentences or paragraphs regarding a step when you could just bullet it out? So keep it simple, bullet it. But when I grade this, I do flip back and forth as I view a picture, and then I'll run through the steps. And I am looking to see if you've left out a step. And so I've used Photoshop for a long enough time that I can generally pick up pretty quickly if, they forgot to include a color adjustment here. They didn't talk about, how they composited this lightning into this picture. So you do need to include all of the steps. And I do think it's helpful to keep a notebook out as you work and just kind of write things down as you work through the process. You could also open up a Word document or something like that if you'd like to type it out. Now, we have not talked about the history panel in Photoshop, and students usually find that. And it does keep a history of everything that you have done up until you save and close your picture. So if you run through your image over a few days, it will not save all of the work that you have done. So again, regardless of the approach you take, you still need to be writing it down or converting it over into a Word document. And feel free to ask questions about that during our class periods over the next 2 weeks. Now, again, I have examples here. You can see Karlie Kloss and 3 distinct outputs. Okay, these mostly use things like adjustments and filters, and you can certainly see images were composited into the background. Okay, Gwyneth Paltrow and the Royal Tenenbaums, again, different techniques. There are some adjustments and things like that used to affect the color, but you also see that a simple tool was used here. The student used either the pen tool or perhaps a brush tool to create an illustrated rendering of the subject. And then, of course, there is work in all of the backgrounds. And then here you'll see, again, a little bit of a simpler subject. This is Twiggy and 3 different outputs. And these are really distinct from the others in the sense that you have a much more layered approach in terms of adjustments and filters and the like, but also more complicated processes. So here you'll see she appears as a spirit in the sky. Here you'll see there's several artistic movements that were clearly used as the inspiration for this image. And what I like to tell students is that if you have an idea for something, like this spirit in the sky, someone has likely already done that. Another example is if you want to create fire or you want to turn her into smoke. Another example I used in class was actually the same subject. Twiggy was carved into the foam in a cup of cappuccino. The student didn't figure that out. That would have taken a new student in Photoshop a long time. But again, someone's already figured that out. You can go online and you can search for tutorials. And I am fine with that because as you're working through a tutorial, you are being introduced to new concepts and tools. And it's also reiterating the tools and concepts that you've learned in class. So in my mind, it's a win-win. You generally have a higher quality of project. It's extra fun for me to grade when you've taken those extra steps. You've learned something. So, I think it's fantastic if you want to do that. Now, another note that I want to make as I'm looking at these pictures is I want you to think about the practice assignments that we have worked through in class using the selection tools. We've got Karlie Kloss on a white background. We have Gwyneth Paltrow on this really complex background, and then we have Twiggy, again, much more simplistic. Okay, which of these is going to be the easiest to select the background and delete? Okay, it's not going to be Gwyneth here. Okay, it's going to be Karlie Kloss on white because it looks like one continuous tone of white. Okay, the second easiest would be Twiggy. It's black and white, so you may not be able to pick up the background with something like the magic wand, but you see how simplistic her form is. Okay, you could use something like the lasso or the object select tool and likely separate her from the background pretty easily. Okay, this one will be harder, not only because the background is complex, but she's also in this fur coat. And if you're trying to really get a clean edge here or to get it perfect, that will be more challenging than something that is very smooth. So as you think about your images, I want you to take that into consideration. Don't make the project harder than it needs to be. Okay. And then the final note I kind of want to share here is just that I do have students who are, just really, really new to the program and at this point are feeling stressed or concerned that they're not going to do well. And I do want to point out that I know I've got a mix of students. I always do. And so there will be some projects that perhaps look a little more professional because the student's a little more practiced versus another student who followed all of the rules, showed me a wealth of techniques using Photoshop, which is what I expect on this project, but their output just looks maybe a little bit more amateur. And I'm not grading that. I am grading how distinct these images are. Is it obvious that there was a wealth of techniques used in Photoshop? And did they do the best they could? And so again, looking here, I think these look more professional than some of these do. Okay, there are just some rougher edges around the subject. There are elements that I think you can just tell look a little more professional here and maybe a little bit more amateur here. But again, at the end of the day, in terms of everything that's expected on this project, both students were successful. Okay. If you scan down, you'll see obviously the due date, and we will do in-person presentations again for the students that were comfortable to come to class. And then at the very, very bottom, you see all of the criteria. And so you'll see you get 20 points for just adhering to specs. So you use the right size board, all of your cuts are clean, you follow the spec guidelines, you've attached the stuff to the back of the board, you followed the rules, you get 20 points. Now you also get 20 points for each of your images. Okay, so this is reflecting that this is more of a creative project and you're getting more credit for that. That's 60 points total. And then you have 20 points for the documentation. Okay, and that is as I'm grading the pictures and looking to see if you've included all of the steps. That's what I'm looking at. And if it feels like you've missed a couple of steps, then you're going to get some points deducted. Okay, and again, your total project is worth 100 points.